Alrighty, guys, this is Module 39, the dynamics of intelligence. Okay, so in psychology, one question is, does our IQ stay stable or does it change over time? And there's a couple of different ways to study this. There are two research methods, which we call longitudinal studies or cross-sectional studies. So longitudinal studies is a research method that takes a particular cohort, so a group of people, and they follow that exact group of people over a period of time. So let's say they test them when they're 7, and then they test those same people again when they're 15. That would be a longitudinal study. The other way to test this is through cross-sectional, where you take people from different age groups and measure them all at the same time. So, for example, instead of following the same 7-year-olds until they're 15, I could take a random sample of 7-year-olds and a random sample of 15-year-olds and compare those scores from those two groups. And that would be a cross-sectional study. So what research has found is that until late in life, so like your 80s, our intelligence remains pretty stable and sometimes can even increase because knowledge about the world increases over time. So there are two types of intelligence. We have what we call crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. As we age, crystallized intelligence gets larger, so it grows, meaning our crystallized intelligence is all of our accumulated knowledge. So obviously, as you get older, you learn more and more, and so that's basically building up your crystallized intelligence. Our fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is our ability to reason speedily and abstractly as when solving novel logic problems. So when you're like doing puzzles, things like that, that's more of like fluid intelligence. And this continues to grow until about your late 20s. This is where it peaks, and then like into your early 30s, it's going to start a steady decline until about to 75, and then rapidly after age 85. So you can think of this because this makes sense why maybe your grandma or grandpa has a hard time, learning how to use an iPhone, because this is more like thinking skills, not knowledge, ability to learn new things kind of idea. And so while our fluid intelligence goes down as we age, our crystallized intelligence goes up. Now, interestingly, by age 4, our scores are predictive of later childhood and our adolescent IQ scores. So they're pretty good at predicting what we're going to score later. And then if you get tested at age 11, it is very predictable what you will score later into your life, even at age 90. So kids were given an IQ test at age 11, re-given it at age 90, same score. So intelligence stays relatively the same. Also, children and adults who are more intelligent also tend to live healthier and longer lives. I'd like you in your notes to think about what could be some third variables there, or what could be causing that longer lifespan due to increased intelligence. Okay, now let's talk about the extremes of intelligence. So when we're talking about the lower end of the spectrum, we're talking about people who may be diagnosed with an intellectual disability. And so these are people who have an intelligence test score of 70 or below, and they have to have both criteria and difficulty adapting to the demands of life, whether that be conceptual, so maybe they can't use language, maybe they have social problems or practical problems, they can't take care of themselves, something along those lines. One example of an intellectual disability is Down syndrome. This is a condition where an individual could have mild to severe intellectual disabilities and other associated disorders. And this Down syndrome is caused by basically a mutation that causes an extra copy of chromosome 21. Now, intellectual disabilities are not purely genetic and they're not purely environmental. Again, just like with any other trait, they're a mixture. And so it could be due to a variety of things. Now, interestingly, those with IQs below 70 have in the U.S. It has been ruled that if they commit a crime, they are unable to be put to death because it's considered cruel and unusual punishment. Now, if someone's IQ is slightly higher, let's say 75, they can take into account kind of other factors that might play a role. Then on the other end of the spectrum is high IQ scores. So Lewis Terman, the guy who created the Stanford Binet test, he studied 1,500 California kids who had over 135 IQ. He tracked them late into their life, and he found that many of them became doctors, lawyers, professors, scientists, and writers. Many of them were highly educated, though none of them were Nobel Prize winners, interestingly. Of the kids who score in the top like percent on the SAT, they found that while only 1% of Americans tend to earn doctorates, these kids, the kids who had the highest scores on the SAT, 40% of them ended up earning their doctorates. Now, GATE education. As an AP teacher, I have a lot of former GATE kids, and GATE stands for Gifted and Talented Education. Originally, this was made to help kids who were really smart be challenged enough so that they could get enough learning. There has been some critics of GATE programs, though, because especially when these kids are completely segregated from non-GATE kids, because it kind of privileges those kids and can put the other children who are considered not gifted or talented, it robs them of the opportunity to get that enrichment, get those challenges, and so it can almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You label this kid as gifted, you treat them as though they're gifted, they're more likely to act in a gifted way than a child who is not treated in that same way. Now, we have a little bit different of test yourself questions. These are open answer questions. Please go ahead and answer these in your notes, and I'll